Hello, good afternoon to everyone who is following us today. My name is Sebastian Rodriguez. I work at the European Movement International, and I am the communications lead of the Real Deal, which is an EU-funded project that supports greater citizen participation and deliberation in the green and just transition. I will be also your host today in a series of webinars that the partners behind the Real Deal have put together in order to address some of the pressing issues that are related to exactly that: citizen participation, involving citizens, involving Europeans, involving people in the decisions that directly affect them and that are related to the green and just transition. The first online session that we had was last week, and we had a very interesting conversation on how to involve marginalized and underrepresented groups in the green and just transition. And we brought a diverse set of profiles to the to this session, including people who spoke about the challenges for people with disabilities, the challenges for minorities, the challenges for the global south, and so on and so on. So it was a very interesting discussion that I encourage you to watch and to follow on our go to our website and check. You can check the recording again. But today is a even more interesting one, because we are not going to be talking so much about policy, which is in the end the ultimate goal of our project, which is influence decision makers and stakeholders and give them tools, give them best practices on how they can involve more people, how can they involve citizens in the decisions that affect them and that are related to the green and just transition. Today is going to be more a session for those of us who communicate the green transition in every day. We do it at work, we do it with our families, we do it with our friends. And what we are looking for today are strategies, top tips from experts who actually they do this every day and they do it very well. So without further ado, I wanted to bring to this session and start the discussion with them. I'm gonna bring first Sevin Aktas. She is the person behind a very influential Instagram account called EU Green Deal Brief, but she also works in the European Commission. She's a policy officer, and what you do, Sevin, is try to, or as I understand what you do, is you try to communicate with young people all these very complex matters that you have to deal with in your work. You are trying to make them more accessible to everyday citizen. But perhaps tell us a little bit more, Sevin, about yourself, how you also got to the place where you are now.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Sebastian, and welcome everyone. Nice meeting you. I want to clarify actually that my Instagram account is totally separate from my work at the Commission. So I work in the Climate Action Department on the team on carbon removals. And in my free time, on a very voluntary basis, I have this Instagram account, as Sebastian mentioned, EU Green Deal Brief. And that's indeed where I try to make EU energy and climate topics more accessible. Coming from a non-communication background at all, I studied engineering, energy engineering in specific, and knowing me a couple of years back during my bachelor's, for example, having no idea about the EU or the Green Deal and really also not caring much about it, was my motivation why I started this Instagram account. The moment when I noticed the beauty and the impact of the EU institutions, especially when it comes to climate change and the energy transition, I just wanted to make these topics more accessible to exactly people like me during my bachelor's. And it led to a community now of almost 18,000 followers, which are gladly following EU energy and climate policy updates, which makes me very happy to see so many interested people in such a niche field. But yeah, I'm very happy to share some of my tips that I learned along the way. As I said, from a person who doesn't have a communications background, so actually doesn't know who and what she's talking about.
Thank you, and I think that's one of the reasons that you are also here today with us, to try to tap into that experience that you had. Next up is Tim. Tim is the hello Tim. He is the Tim McPhee. Is the European Commission spokesperson for climate action and energy. Is the guy who has to sit in front of media, like journalists from all across Europe, and convey the message that the European Commission wants to convey around the different proposals of the European Green Deal. And therefore, it's a very interesting person, very relevant professional to have with us today. But perhaps, Tim, like Sevin does, it's always better to listen from the original source. So tell us a little bit about your story and how you got to where you are now.
Thanks, Sebastian. Yeah, I mean, a bit like Sevim, I mean, I have no formal training in communication. It's just one of those things that I ended up in over the course of my career. I studied law at university. So you've got a lawyer and an engineer talking to you about communications. So it should be interesting. Yeah, I've been in Brussels now over 18 years. And for the last 8 of those, I've been working in the spokesperson service of the Commission. So a spokesperson since the start of the von der Leyen Commission. And then I was also in spokesperson service in the previous Commission under President Juncker, working as a press officer and doing some editorial work on a whole range of different issues, a lot of non-green stuff as well. And then before that, a few years in Brussels doing advocacy work, policy work, and I've worked on a couple of European election campaigns as well. So for the lead candidates in 2019 and 2014. So I've done a few different things in Brussels.
Perfect. Well, I think the stage is set. And now what is going to be interesting is to start diving into all these topics. Again, this is not a policy discussion. This is not about the latest proposal of the Commission, or this is a session from communicators to communicators, because we see, and that's one of the idea behind this session. We see that there is really, it's as a result of the success of the European Green Deal and how it is already impacting people's lives. Governments start rolling out their own plans. There is, as in any other democratic setting, there is, I would say, it's now a topic of discussion. I wouldn't say like a backlash, complete backlash, but certainly now, as this is becoming parts of every citizen's life, citizens, they have an opinion. They probably, our project is about involving them in this transition. So, our premise is that we could do more to involve them in those decisions that decision makers are taking. And so we find ourselves, communicators from civil society, NGOs, but also at a personal level, we find ourselves in the situation of explaining to them what are the benefits of, or what is the real challenge behind why this policy was put in place, what are the main narratives that are positive narratives about how great this transition could be if we manage to do a transition, not only a green transition, but also digital transition. And now when you talk to everyday people, you need to adapt your language, right? You need to talk in a different way, because they are not policy wonks like we are. And they also deserve to also be part of the conversation. So I want to look first at Sevin, because you talk to young people who are probably the most enthusiastic about the Green Deal and about what that represents. I always wonder, well, I was also very enthusiastic when I was 18, 19. Now, as you grow older, I think views change about the world, but clearly young people will be the ones supporting the this transition, this green transition. So what would be why did you create this account? And I think not only why, like, what is what are the when you are posting content, and you can tell us a little bit more about your content, what is in your mind? What are you thinking? Okay, no, I cannot use these formats, or I cannot use this type of language. What is in your mind when you are communicating through Instagram with these younger audiences?
Sure. Maybe I can summarize it in 3 points in particular, 3 takeaways that I had during my journey of doing this Instagram, which started 2 years and a month ago. So we're going back to June 2021, when I started at the Commission as a policy officer. And 2 weeks in, I was like, okay, let's give it a try. And I called it in the beginning an experiment, because first of all, I didn't know whether I'm gonna like doing this and for how long I will continue doing this. I'm very much a person driven by fun, and I keep on doing what's fun to me. But the first few months was really experimenting, and I'm still experimenting a lot. And that's one of my first takeaways: experiment, try different concepts. And for the first 2-4 months, it was really like trying different types of styles, different types of content, and all these type of things. A lot of things were going wrong there. But what I did end of the year, so December 2021, when I was for Christmas back home in Germany with my family. I have a big family, so I put them all together on the table and did pretty much like a little workshop with them, and was saying to my sister and my brother, like, guys, I know you're scrolling like this through my posts. Why? And that conversation really pinpointed like the core principles and the core changes that I did to my content as well. Jargon was one of the biggest things. I don't understand what you're saying. It's a lot of content that you're putting on the slides, very inconsistent. Like, it's very like all over colors and stuff like that. A lot of input. So I made like the simplest templates ever, meaning like the Helvetica and Times New Roman that I use at fonts, and exactly the same format of posts for templates, which in the end makes my life easier as well. So I have a couple of main content streams, or like series, let me say, which is policy briefs, where I really just summarize EU articles. But I will dive into that in my second tip on execution takeaways, where I pretty much translate EU articles into 4 takeaways, what people should know. Monthly photo dumps, where I summarize the highlights of the month. Career tips, which are very much appreciated, especially by the youngsters, on how to start their EU journey. Or how to start your career in climate change topics. So this doesn't necessarily focus on EU, but could be like climate change courses, etc. And then like my Sunday trips, or EU jargon or climate jargon explained, startups in the EU climate landscape to get an overview there, which also presents a career opportunity for them. So really trying to get them more into like the green, sustainable pathway, let me say. And EU Green Deal's news roundup, which I noticed that a lot of people appreciate a lot as well, just to get a quick summary of what happened in the previous month. When I come to my second point, which is on execution, I'll just walk you through my steps, because I notice it's literally like a flow chart happening in my mind when I create this post. Is 1, my templates are just like a guideline. I don't go over them. It's always simple, easy, and that's my core. I also don't have a lot of time preparing these posts. I mean, I do it on the side, I do it in the evenings, on the weekends, or quickly in the morning or something. So it needs to be very efficient for me. So I take an EU news article and I pretty much copy paste the important key takeaways, and those are usually 4. After this copy pasting exercise, I rewrite them or make them shorter. And then I really ask myself, so what? So I go for each of these 4 takeaways and I'm like, so what? Like, what's the insight that people get with this sentence that I put up there? And I screen for terminology. So are there any words that are really like jargon, specific terminology that I either explain or find a replacement? And I tend to do that. I used to do that a lot before. I do that a bit less now, but I always send my posts to my family, to my siblings for review, to be like, guys, do you understand this? Does it make sense? Is it interesting? And that was always like a good check, like a good feedback loop that I had there. And only then I would post it. Now it's a little bit more smooth, but ultimately it was avoiding EU jargon, the simpler the better, and also practicing the art of saying more with less, which is really good for me because I tend to talk a lot as well. So it was also like a personal gain for me. But there are also courses on that, like when it comes to the art of saying more with less. And then the last thing, I think this will be like the most insightful aspect of it, is the mix between hooks and content. So ideally, I would only produce content, which is policy briefs. But what I noticed is that these hooks, which are reels or like also sharing some insights about my work life, which is pretty much saying, oh, this morning I'm working on a report, or this afternoon I have meetings, which sounds extremely basic. I don't share anything in detail on what that entails, but for some reason that people really appreciate it, to have that accessibility of like, okay, what does a policy officer do? As vague as it might be what I'm sharing, but I really noticed, and it's a sad aspect of it as well, but at the same time, the hook, the difference between the content posts and the real posts, for example, or like these photo dumps that I do. So these photo dumps, for example, they get around 700 likes, which is quite a lot in my referencing, let me say. While content related posts or policy briefs or whatsoever is usually like around 150, 200, like 300 if we're really pushing for it. But there's a clear difference. And I do get a lot of unfollows as well, because these hook videos, so these reels where I try to romanticize the EU a little bit, really just to touch the feeling of excitement of people. I notice that's really like the resonance that I get. Like people are excited, it's like, whoa, this is really cool. That's the hook to lead them to my account pretty much, where there is like a lot of content happening. But I do get a lot of unfollows too, because they're like, whoa, this is a lot of content. I didn't subscribe for this. So it's like pretty much my way of luring the people in with, because these reels, obviously they're being spread around. One of my latest one, for example, which I couldn't believe. I mean, I really don't understand Instagram and how the algorithm works, but it's this 10-second reel which I created in 5 minutes pretty much, which now got like around 100,000 views or something. And over the last week made me gain another 4,000 followers. I mean, this is really, I have no idea how, as I said, it's a black box. But this romanticizing part of the EU really helps. And what I do for that is pretty much copying fashion, lifestyle, habits, Instagram accounts that we all know. There's this template feature on Instagram where I pretty much edit with my own content, like a EU sneak peek once in a while. Not too obvious, but that I notice really helps in getting in the algorithm push. So that's pretty much it. And one thing that I noticed in this entire process, and that was during an event a couple of months ago, a networking event here in Brussels that I shared on my Instagram as well. One of the followers came up to me and she was like, hey, it's really cool what you're doing. And then she said like really the key phrase, which I noticed is actually the secret to this entire Instagram account. She said to me, I can imagine to be you. And I was standing there, I didn't expect it. And I was like, yeah, you can be me. Be better than me, you know, like you do even more. I mean, just and then I thought about this a bit afterwards, and I really realized that being relatable make people take action. Like they can imagine to be me. They're like, if she can do that, I can do it as well. And the amount of messages that I receive on a daily basis, really, saying that they applied for a job or that they got a job, is it in the EU institutions, agencies, or just like in their governments, in a company, or like an opportunity that I shared, is just insane, and it's truly heartwarming to see that happening. Also, like in the last Blue Book round, for example, one of the Blue Books and spotted me on the corridor, and he was like, hey, aren't you this girl who did this video? And I was like, maybe, I don't know. And he's like, yeah, you're an engineer as well, no? I'm like, yeah. He's like, he said that he saw my video on YouTube where I like share some tips about the Blue Book traineeship. And he said that the moment when I said that I was an engineer as well, that made him apply as well. And there are a lot of STEM people who I noticed like are on my account that see a totally new career path for them. And that for me is like the most beautiful thing, really, that I truly, truly appreciate. So if there are any tips here that I could share now along with you, and I really hope, and I try to make it practical, yeah, that those are the things that pretty much I notice work for me.
And you touch upon, thank you so much, Sevin. You touch upon like so many things that are obvious, but they are rare. They are obvious but rare. It's one of these things, which is relatability. Like the audience that you want to reach, they need to feel close to you. In your example, I mean, you made an example that people say, yeah, I could be you, but sometimes it's more about I could agree with what you're saying, like, or I could agree, or thanks to the way you have explained it, I have a more favorable view of this, because so far, especially when it comes to green issues, what I am getting is a lot of conspiracy, like a lot of climate denial, a lot of conspiracy, and now like I come across with a narrative that is positive, that is embodied by someone that I relate to, and that's the power of communications, right? It's like it's very interesting to see as an example from you. We will delve into that later, because I have some questions, and also how this ties with the work that the European movement is doing to try improve, to try to do proper evidence-based strategic communications. And one of the things is like you cannot go to your family, to your father, your cousin, with the same language, the same imagery that you would use to motivate a volunteer or a supporter who is already convinced and who needs other type of stimulus. You need to talk to them. You need to play different cards with those people who we call are not in the immediate sphere of influence of what we do as organizations, as institutions, but they are exactly like they are in the next level of the sphere of influence. And we, by changing a little bit how we do things, we can really tap into those into those audiences. And one way to tap into those audiences, I think, especially here in Europe, is through media, through the newspapers they read, the radio, morning program that I myself am like a big radio listener, and I get most of the information from all the politics, the news, and the person who actually has to face those professionals or journalists almost every week, certainly, is Tim. Tim, I am like very interested in hearing about like your top tips, but also you represent an institution, and you are facing when you represent an institution like the European Commission, and then you have in front of you journalists from literally every country in Europe. Every country has like a different lens, a different angle. How do you think about, okay, how I'm going to communicate this? Do you look for a common denominator? Do you look for certain narratives that might play well with this journalist, or you just read the talking points that they have given to you? I'm pretty sure you don't, but I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
No, if I'm reading any talking points, I've been writing them myself, so it's okay. Yeah, I think there's this little bit of a bad press that we have as spokespersons, that we just stand up and read things like robots, but it's very much not true, and certainly a lot less than it was in the past. I mean, we are here as communication professionals because we have an ability which is more than the ability to read and answer a question and find the answers. So yeah, luckily the job is a bit more interesting than that. But no, you make a good point. I mean, we have around 1,000 accredited journalists in Brussels, not coming every day to our press briefings, but they all have the right to come. And every day we're standing up, me and my colleagues, for anything from 15 minutes to 2 hours on the podium, kind of back and forth and fielding questions. So yeah, there's lots of ways to deal with that. But yeah, what I thought I would try and do is get through 5 points, 5 tips, just as a kickoff, and then of course go into more detail. So I think the first thing that I want to say is that you need to focus on priorities and focus on long-term goals. The second thing is going to be about keeping the language simple and trusting your instincts as a communicator. Finding something in it for everybody. So a little bit what you were saying there about different audiences. Telling good stories and finding solutions. So the first point on sticking to your priorities. I mean, as the European Commission, whatever you think about the European Commission, we have a voice and an influence in the debate on the Green Deal. We're not the only voice out there, but I think in terms of the European political sphere, the fact that our president said the European Green Deal is her number one priority set the tone for this mandate. And then we have kept delivering on that and reinforcing that. And there have been so many challenges that we faced in the last 3.5, 4 years, and so many ways that we could have been distracted and excuses that we could have had to drop the Green Deal, to change priorities. And I think it's to the credit of the president and the leadership and everybody working on communications here in the Commission that we haven't done that. So when you're working on a topic like climate, where the perspective is more than tomorrow's headline, you really need to focus on those long-term goals. Stick to your goals, don't get distracted by them. And find a way to tie the daily news to your story, to make sure your story repeats itself. Whatever crisis you're in, whatever challenge you're in, thinking about how your project, your green project, responds to those challenges. Now, if I think about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the huge challenges we have with energy supply, with energy prices, we were able to turn that on its head. There were people that saying, okay, now it's game over. You need to double down on coal, on gas, on oil. Forget about this green stuff. It's too expensive. It's too difficult. And that's when we took the opposite approach. We doubled down. We increased our targets on renewable energy, on energy efficiency. And we showed people that the solution to the short-term problems is the long-term project that we're working on. So don't get distracted by crisis, whether it's COVID, whether it's high energy bills, whether it's Green Deal, whether it's the war, believe in the long-term benefits of what you're doing, link that to the news of the day and keep building on it and keep reinforcing your message. Don't get distracted and don't give up. The next point, you've touched upon that, both of you already, is the simplicity of language. In climate, in environment, in energy, there's so much jargon out there. There's mitigation, there's adaptation, there's LULUCF. There's all these things which mean nothing to 99% of people in Europe. Our job as communicators is to get those words out of the press release, out of the social media post, out of the conversation as much as we can, because we need to reach people. It's such a common thing in Brussels in particular. There's a bunch of very intelligent people working in policy and communications. Everybody wants to show how clever they are. Don't worry about that. The people that work with you know you're clever. Your job is not to show that you are intelligent. Your job is to get your messages to reach the end audience. So remember that. And when sometimes people get distracted or humbled or shy, your boss, your lawyer, whoever it is in your hierarchy is trying to push a different message, a different language. You're a communicator. Your job is language. Your job is messaging. Your job is getting things across. So have kind of the confidence and the courage in yourself, in your profession, in your skills to push back and say no, to argue your case with your boss, to argue your case with your colleagues. Because frankly, if you're not doing that, what's the point? You're an inbox, you're a mailbox. I mean, if you're not trying to find the best words in a press release, if you're not trying to find the most powerful image for a social media post or a poster or whatever it is, advertising campaign, if you're not trying to find the best channel to reach your audience, then what's the point? So believe in yourself, bring your skills to the table, bring your ideas to the table. And I could name examples of this where I've done, and both good and bad. I had one, a few weeks ago, working with a colleague who was doing a speech, some speaking points for a commissioner. And, I have a look at these things from time to time, even if I'm not the speechwriter. And I looked through and there was a couple of sentences and I thought, not sure the boss is going to want to say that, because it's somebody I know, that I understand their kind of tone and their approach. And I kind of self-censored and I didn't push back and I didn't say to the colleague, I'm not sure that's going to work. A couple of days later, text goes to the boss. Boss says, don't like that, for exactly the same reasons that I thought that they would. And I self-censored. I hadn't pushed the point, probably doing 5 other things at the same time. So just, trust in your instincts, trust in your knowledge of the people you're working with, trust in your knowledge of the audience. As I said, that's your job. That's what you're hired for. That's what you're getting paid for. So bring everything of yourself to the job and really try and make it simple and clear. You're not the lawyer. You're not the engineer. You're not defending this in court. You're not negotiating the legislation in Parliament or Council. You're trying to reach, the outside world. So focus on that. The final point. The third point I wanted to make is show that there's something in it for everybody. Sebastian, you were talking about different national audiences, but it's about so much more than that. I often describe the European Green Deal as a chameleon. It's something which changes its color depending on the political background, which makes it a little bit harder to kill off. So, if you're going through a health crisis, you can talk about the benefits for health of good environmental policies, of, not having, higher diseases because there's, different insects which are now reaching Europe that weren't there before, carrying diseases. If you're talking to an audience which is more concerned about security, about migration, we had a communication a couple of weeks ago on this and events around this. You talk about the impacts on, global security, stability that come from migration. The economic imperative, of course, is so strong. And we spent a lot of time on that this year in the Commission, talking about the net zero industry, competitiveness of European industry, growth and jobs. So, find your audience, find the common ground, and talk to them, on that common ground. That to answer the question you said, there is no one perfect message. That's not what you should be striving for as a communicator. You might have a great soundbite, a great line, which, your family likes, your friends like, your colleagues like, but somebody else is not interested and has a different perspective. So find the right way to talk to the different audiences. Fourth point I wanted to talk about is storytelling. And I have to say, as an institution, it's something we struggle with. As the European Commission, what do we communicate about? We communicate about policies, laws, regulations, or we communicate about the money that we've given somebody else to put a project in place. So we're not great at storytelling. Certainly, here in Brussels, it's not what we're set up to do. But luckily for the Green Deal, we have some excellent storytellers, and Executive Vice President Timmermans is one of them, and we're very, very lucky to have him as somebody who communicates around the Green Deal. And one of the challenges we have with the Green Deal is the question of time. We are communicating, especially as policymakers, on things that we want to happen in the future. Here's a proposal which will be negotiated for 2 years, which will come into force, which will show its effect in 5 years, 10 years' time. We're talking about 2030, about 2050. And that's hard for people to get their heads around. But he, in his speeches, he finds ways to talk about time in a way that hit people kind of in the guts and in the heart. I was with him at COP26 in Glasgow. We were having a very difficult time in the negotiations. He took the floor in the plenary and he held up a photo of his grandson. And he basically said, this is my grandson. His name is Kees. He's 1 year old. I'm thinking about his future when I talk about 2030, when I talk about 2050. And it brought emotion to the room, to a very technically, politically difficult moment. The press loved it. It's a photo moment. It's something in which they can put online and put into stories, give a bit of humanity to it. And another thing that he's done recently in speech is talk about this concept of thinking of the future. And he pulled up this example of people 1,000 years ago were building cathedrals. And when you start building a cathedral, it's something that you will never see finished. And he says, imagine in our society, people building something that they never thought they would finish. we're in this kind of instant gratification period. And he said, so what does that mean? How do we get people to think about building things in the future? And then he said, well, think about our ancestors. There's a lot of cultures, European cultures, Eastern cultures, where people want to honor their ancestors, respect their ancestors. But what about, how to be a good ancestor? And he says, to be a good ancestor is about doing things now with policy, with the transition, which, your children, grandchildren, and further down the line will be proud of. So I think that's a really nice way to turn things which are abstract and which are distant into things which you feel now and you understand the importance of. So as I say, storytelling is not a talent that institutions have, but I think good politicians and good communicators can bring that. And then final point I want to make is about solutions. We spend so much time talking about problems when we talk about the Green Deal, the threats that are to come. We need to start focusing more on solutions. I think as the institutions as well, we've done a lot of policy work, and now we need to see the transition as something which is real, which is happening, and which is something that people can believe in. And I think that's something the institutions need to do, local governments, NGOs, industries, and find a way to get people to buy in, whether it's your sense of responsibility, your aspiration, making things accessible, making things desirable in the transition. So I think that's really important. Again, we don't have a great track record on that as an institution, but we've done some good stuff. I think last year we had some big successes in terms of convincing European population to think about their energy consumption. We were in a situation of energy crisis, high prices, concerns about supply, of course, with what Russia was doing, reducing its energy supplies to the global market. So we managed to convey to European citizens, of course, not us only, but governments as well and other stakeholders, little things that everybody can do individually, which have a big collective impact. So I think as well, that's something where we're getting better as an institution. I think of COVID as well, where the Commission was very much an authoritative voice in terms of behavioral things, what people could do as individuals, respect for people around you, how we communicated around travel and all these kind of things. But really, it's not easy. And those of you that work on things like transport, on food, the taboo around behavioral change and communicating around behavioral change. Brussels tells you to do this. Out of touch European bureaucrat in his ivory tower says, I should do something which I can't afford. He doesn't understand my life. So people listening and watching are better at that than us, and have more credibility than us. But everybody has a role to play. But let's communicate on solutions. Let's make people think that this is something that we can achieve. We need to get away from this big, scary, fearful doom event, which is the future of our planet, to actually it's something that we can avoid. So voila, 5 points, hopefully not too long.
I'm enjoying this so much. And people who are following us through, we have, for example, a lot of reaction, lively discussion on YouTube. We have Hannah saying that, she agreed. Well, Hannah, by the way, she's great. She's one of the greatest person to work with. She works at Women Engage Common Future. And as she pointed out, exactly, many small organizations might find it difficult to fight that jargon because they don't have dedicated comms teams. Well, hire more people for your comms department. I think that's always and not always junior people. Hire senior communicators, strategic communicators, but the struggle is real. She also raised the point about ChatGPT, which I will touch upon later. Okay, I will ask about these tools, these tools that we can all use. But before that, and please keep sending all your questions and reactions, and reading them all, and I will bring them to the speakers in the next few minutes. But as the host, I'm going to use my privilege to ask a couple of questions to both Tim and Sevin, because we, I guess the main challenge for the partners, like the partners that are behind the real deal, who are leading climate and environmental NGOs, democracy, like the European movement, advocating for democracy. Sometimes our challenge is to reach beyond our base. We're really good at getting people to sign our petitions, to some of them to join a street protest, but then we immediately think that we need to copy paste all those imagery, all this language, and use it to try to convince other people. I always talk about it as you try to, as organizations, we need to be able to fish from a bigger pond of people, because the pond of people who already follow our organizations, the Brussels media, they are already either for the good side or the bad side, they are already convinced. So to me, I always think about like this bigger pond where we can actually bring people towards our organizations and towards our organization's goals more than towards our organization. So we get things, and with the European movement, we have been working on this strategic communications methodology that we start doing it properly with polling. We do a lot of focus group polling, and we try to understand how people on those target audiences, which are, again, not the ones that are strictly the ones that are following us, but maybe the friends of the ones who are following us, the people who get up every day, need to take the kids to the school, need to do after the school, need to take them to whichever sport they are doing, and they don't have time to think and to spend so much time thinking about these issues. And we often find that those organizations, we try to invite them to our cause by saying, here's an image of a peaceful protest about the climate. Here is this language that is very like climate justice now, and the jargon. And then we need to understand that for these people, this is going to a protest for as much as this is necessary to do that is not part of their daily life. It's not something. In fact, it's something that can be that they are on the opposite side of the protest because they are slowing down traffic or because they are in the metro, and it's more an inconvenience than something positive. So they don't associate these things positively with the green transition. So, for example, I'm thinking about young people, Sevin. Do you think people react better, the people that you are communicating with, when you are transmitting like a hopeful, positive message and narrative about the green transition, or when you are saying, "Oh, the end is gonna be near. We need to act now." Older generations, they are not doing what they're. We're gonna have to pick up the. We're gonna have to inherit all this mess that they have left us behind. That's a powerful narrative in the climate movement. Like the young people have to be the ones who need to do the work, because look at the mess that they have left us. But what is, in your view, I mean, should we go for positive? Should we go for negative? But at the same time, like trying people to trigger a reaction, an emotional reaction to do something, a combination of both. What is your experience?
I can talk about my experience first, and then I'll give my take on this. I'm a pragmatic person, I have to say. I in my communication, my personality pretty much is reflected in the way that I talk about the topics, which is more an optimistic, but at the same time, like if I see sometimes news that are going in a backwards direction, I also post, I was like, whoa, what's happening? Like a type of a reality check on both ways. So I would say I have a more pragmatic stuff that I find interesting. I share as well. My apologies. But when it comes to my stake on this, I mean, there's so many organizations present right now following this webinar. pick your narrative. It's what Tim talked about earlier as well. Like there's so many different types of groups, so many different types of characters that whose narratives speak to differently. So some might be more, attracted by this call to action, stuff needs to happen, older generation type of narrative. Others more from the optimistic, others more from a very pragmatic perspective. So from that point of view, I would say there's no and or, but whatever the organization feels also true to their values, to what they believe in. So from that perspective, choose your battle. But what I notice a lot of people on my, and as I said, my followers are the people who I speak likable to. So those, but I do get sometimes constructive feedback, which I'm really surprised about why it's always very constructive, but it's more like a discussion and exchanging thoughts on hey, I think like this about that topic, or I think like that about that topic, but on a, as I said, more exchangey, trustworthy relation than attack. I'm quite surprised, but up until now, I've never really received attacky comments of whoa, the commission is doing that, or how can you present this, or something like that, but more from a co-thinking and discussing with me than anything else.
Okay. Interesting. Tim, quick question. Sometimes you probably have this as part of your daily work, but sometimes I feel people promoting the green transition, we spend a great amount of time debunking myths and explaining why. For example, the other day, not the other day, a few months ago, one member of the family comes, I say, I heard that the EU wants to ban cars. I'm not going to be able to drive my car that I just bought. The EU, why the EU is trying to do that? And I'm like, okay, no, this is not exactly what has been approved. And then I try to explain, but I often find ourselves explaining or debunking myths that are so easily spread by others, rather than saying that I'm spending more time in promoting our own narratives. What is your take on this? What do you spend more time on? Debunking myths, promoting your own narrative and your message?
Yeah, I mean, we try and focus more on our own message and getting our narrative and our story out there. And I think actually when you're dealing with most media outlets, you're dealing with professionals that understand the stories, that want to report fairly. Everybody has their own balance and editorial line, but essentially they don't, on the most part, want to misrepresent you. So the misrepresentation, the kind of weaponization of little lines of stories into something else is often something that happens more on social media than in our dealings with journalists, and therefore it's something which is more being dealt with through our community managers, our social media colleagues. But it's something we get into from time to time, and we get requests from fact checkers. You have that more and more in some of the big newspapers and media agencies these days, that they want to fact check a story so they can go out and debunk information. So yeah, I mean, you're always trying to frame a story in the way that you want, in the way that sets your message in a positive way, in a constructive way. We've had these issues, of course, around things like food. Not me personally, but colleagues have dealt with these stories that the EU is going to ban you from eating meat and you're going to have to eat insects all the time, and all these kind of things. And I've dealt with issues around cars more specifically, and whether we're banning combustion engines and these kind of things. So the job is to explain and to frame, really, from my side, more than to be debunking on a daily basis.
And any tips doing that? Like making sure that you always stay. How do you choose your frame? How do you choose your? How is the thinking about? Okay, we're gonna promote this narrative. Those are the frames that we believe. Do you test that? I mean, is there any way that you more than your instincts, is there any way that you as communicators say, okay, I want to make sure that I am using the right frame, a frame that actually is effective? Do you have anything of that, or you just rely on the experience and the instincts of the communicator who is facing those sometimes questions that you don't expect, no? So not everything can be planned. And
yeah. No, it's true. I mean, there is obviously a place for kind of message testing and polling. It's not really something where, you know, we in our service at least do a lot of investment of time. It's partly because things just move so fast, and a lot of it does have to be instinct. And it's your instinct as a communicator, you know, myself and my colleagues, press officers, spokespersons. You know, our job is to kind of have a feel and have a flavor for how stories will land, how certain languages, how certain issues and narratives work. And then, you know, we're here to convey the political messages from the commission. So the tone is set by the president, by the college of commissioners. So, you know, when you want to talk about an issue, we're obviously, you know, discussing, brainstorming together. When we have new proposals that are coming out, you know, where do you put the focus of the messaging? And of course, we do a lot of sounding out of our representations that we have in each of the 27 member states. You know, so we have a flavor of what are the hot topics, what are the contentious issues, things that we need to factor in. But yeah, in terms of kind of polling, not so much.
all right. Thank you, Tim. I'm gonna bring a couple of questions from those who are following us on social media. We have, for example, Hilmi, who is he works at Solidar. Really, again, like another excellent person to work with, and I'm using this to bring us back and to start preparing for the wrap up of the key takeaways from this discussion, which is how can we make this European Green Deal, and the question we start with you, Tim, more relatable to individuals and communities, ensuring that its goals and initiatives resonate with their everyday lives and concerns. So after this discussion, we can use this to start wrapping up main ideas that resonated with you, and then I will ask Sevin.
Yeah, I think the important thing is, I mean, for the European Commission, but of course also for the organizations watching, is to spend less time talking about policy, or at least in the abstract term. You know, when we're legislating CO2 emission standards for cars, what does that mean? That basically means that we are driving and creating a bigger market, bigger production, bigger availability of clean electric vehicles for citizens. You create the regulatory conditions where these are the only things that are going to be put on the market largely. You create volume, you create scale, you create a breadth of offers, and that helps to bring down prices. So what you communicate to citizens, car users, for example, people that really do need a car and can't depend on public transport or other forms of transport, is that our policy is about giving them a vehicle which is going to be clean, modern, new, efficient, and cheaper to run over its lifetime. You know, when you talk about energy, renewable energy prices, you know, electricity generation costs are much lower. You're talking to people about bringing down their energy bills, and you're talking to people in particular in cities, but also more broadly about air quality. You know, the smell on the street, if you want, as they're walking down. You know, if their kids have got asthma, if they have breathing problems. So, you know, there's a whole range of examples, but there's just a couple. But making it about what matters to people in their daily lives, and yeah, there's so many examples out there that we can use, and you have to tailor it.
Perfect. Over to you, Sevin.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And actually, I was just thinking it was actually the reason why I started this EU Startup Landscape series, actually from a personal point of view first, because we, in the policy landscape, we're always talking about like these decarbonization strategies and things that we need to do. But what I'm always sure of, and this applies to my thinking as well, is every time I think I have a smart thought, I'm like, take a second, Sevin. I'm quite sure that someone else had the same thought as well and actually made the effort to put it very nicely down on the internet somewhere available too. And so far, it's been always the case. And that's exactly what I think with our challenges when it comes to decarbonization as well. I think exactly the same. I'm quite sure there must have been someone out there, an entrepreneur, who recognized this challenge maybe even earlier than us, and actually took the risk to create a solution about it. And what I noticed is, and that's going really into the practical area and checking out the innovation sphere of all the amazing technologies that are already out there, where a lot of investments are flowing into, which is a very good sense also for us as policymakers to have, but also makes it extremely practical for the people to see that a lot of things are already happening in the sphere. And we're not talking about research projects, we're really talking about profitable companies and scale-ups here. So from that perspective, like making that accessible, making people know about these type of solutions, and also in my case with my followers, showing them that could be like a career opportunity and a job opportunity for them, especially from a young professional's perspective, to start in a company, grow with it and grow with the positions of it as well. I mean, also thinking from a career growth perspective is makes it extremely practical, and the people have a benefit for themselves as well. And the second thing that I want to mention, and Tim touched on it earlier already, we keep on talking about challenges the entire time. And this is something that I noticed in particular after coming back from the US in March, where everything was about opportunities. Challenges? Not a thing there at all. Like, it was all about opportunities and like the things that people can do. And thinking about it for some time and coming back here and sitting on panels, for example, with like different stakeholders, I was like, and also with colleagues sometimes in exchanges, I started adopting this phrase, which is, it's a bottleneck, but not a deal breaker. And for some reason, it changed the setting of the conversation and adapted to a bit more of like, hey, okay, let's look at it at a half full glass, because indeed it is possible. And I just want to encourage everyone here to take it as an intellectual challenge, you know, as intellectual, like, I mean, I always find it exciting, you know, like to work on difficult things that are a little bit intertwined. The solution is not obvious, and then cracking that. I mean, isn't that the beauty of also this entire decarbonization area, also in the communication challenge about it? And I just would wish that we would adapt a bit more of an opportunistic perspective of not seeing the challenges as deal breakers, but they're really not, but bottlenecks that we need to deal with. And we can, looking at our history in the past, all the bottlenecks that we've dealt with so far, I mean, the things that we can do with the minds, with the creativity, with the you know, intelligence of the people in Europe and worldwide. I mean, I'm going to be extremely surprised if we're not going to manage, really.
Thank you, Sevin. And with that very high note, I don't think we can add anything more to that, because this is also what we're trying to do. Like, I think talking about green transition and ending on such a high, optimistic, upbeat, positive note, I think this is what's gonna make the difference, and it's gonna make our narratives stand out from the other narratives, alternative narratives that also occupy, especially the digital space. With that, I want to say to everyone who is sending their questions that I wish there are some of them very, very interesting for both of you, but at the same time, our time is up. So I encourage you to go to, especially YouTube. There's a lot of discussion going on YouTube, a lot of really good questions over there, but we don't have time, unfortunately, to address them now. Given like the popularity of this online session, I think we will do more in the future. So don't worry. If you want to follow us, if you're following this because you already signed up, that's okay. We will keep inviting you to all the sessions that we do. If you just came across this live stream, just make sure that you go to realdeal.eu. This is, again, a project that is funded by the European Union's Horizon 2020 grant. It's a research project, so we have a team of leading researchers across Europe, investigating what we can do better when involving citizens in citizen assemblies, focus groups, and get their views and get their input into account for, before making a decision that directly affects them. And we are doing a lot of interesting things on the research side, but we are also very innovative on the comms side with a huge team of partners that are really trying to communicate the European Green Deal and the benefits of involvement from citizens in it every day. So that was really, really helpful. Thanks again, Sevin team, for taking the time. We will, I think we will see each other in the digital space, maybe in the physical space, also in Brussels. But I wish you a very good rest of the week, summer. And thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Sebastian. Thanks, Sevin.
Thanks a lot. Bye.